I don't know. The table stuff, I think, is like when you're sitting up close, I think it's about $190.
For someone known as Mr. Las Vegas, Wayne Newton had always embraced grand ideas. So when he decided to turn his personal estate into a destination for fans, it seemed perfectly on brand. But behind the ambitious plans and millions of dollars invested, cracks began to form. Lawsuits, mounting debts,
They feel like the American public is working for them.
And unusual developments started surfacing, each one adding to a growing sense that something wasn't quite right. Over time, the transformation meant to redefine his legacy took on a different tone, one that left observers increasingly concerned. The making of Mr. Las Vegas. Long before the bright lights of Las Vegas, Wayne Newton's story started with a moment that felt almost too early to be real. By the time most kids were still figuring out the basics of childhood, he had already made up his mind about his future. At just 4 years old, his parents took him to see a Grand Ole Opry roadshow in Roanoke, Virginia. Sitting there, completely locked in, he watched performers like Hank Williams and Kitty Wells take control of the stage. Something clicked instantly. The moment the show ended, he made it clear. That stage was exactly where he wanted to be. And from that point on, he moved like someone who already knew where he was headed. He didn't wait for lessons or formal training. He taught himself how to play piano, guitar, and steel guitar, all by ear. By 6 years old, he wasn't just practicing, he was already working. Every morning before school, he hosted his own daily radio show. Then, on weekends, he and his older brother Jerry were out performing, either alongside traveling Opry acts.
When I think about the fact that nobody in my family on either my mother's side or my father's side,
or playing for crowds at local theaters. It didn't take long before those small performances started turning into bigger opportunities. While still in the first grade, he found himself performing at a USO show attended by President Harry Truman. By 8, he had already entered and won a local talent competition that led to an audition for one of the biggest platforms in the country at the time. Even though that audition didn't go his way, it placed him in the kind of company most performers could only dream of. But behind all that early success, there was a much tougher reality. As a child, Newton struggled with severe asthma, and it wasn't something minor. It became serious enough that his family had to make a life-changing decision. They left Virginia and moved to Phoenix, Arizona, hoping the dry climate would help him breathe easier and keep his growing career alive. That move changed everything. In Phoenix, Newton didn't slow down. If anything, he picked up the pace. He continued performing regularly, appearing on local television, and even landing his own show, all while managing to keep up with school. It was a balancing act that demanded discipline far beyond his years, but it became part of who he was. That same drive traced back to his upbringing. His father, with Powhatan and Irish roots, had fought his way out of poverty, while his mother, of Cherokee and German descent, carried her own strength and resilience. That combination of grit and determination clearly shaped the way Newton approached his life. The real turning point came toward the end of his junior year in high school. A Las Vegas booking agent caught one of his performances and saw something special. Soon after, Wayne and his brother packed up and headed to Las Vegas, with barely anything in their pockets. What was supposed to be a short 2-week engagement at the Fremont Hotel and Casino turned into a 46-week run. But it wasn't easy. The schedule was relentless. 6 shows a day, 6 days a week. That kind of workload would wear down even seasoned performers. To keep his voice from giving out, Newton started adapting on the fly, learning more instruments so he could spread the load during his performances. That decision didn't just help him survive, it helped define him. Over time, he became known as a true multi-instrumentalist, eventually mastering more than a dozen instruments and weaving them into his shows. His rise to national attention came from an unexpected moment. While performing at a luncheon in Phoenix, he caught the attention of Jackie Gleason. Impressed by what he saw, Gleason brought him to New York for an appearance on his television show. That one opportunity turned into many, with Newton returning again and again over the next couple of years. From there, the support kept building. Legends like Lucille Ball, Danny Thomas, George Burns, and Jack Benny all saw something in him and helped open doors. On the music side, Bobby Darin stepped in early, producing and shaping some of Newton's first major hits, including songs that would go on to define his career. Still, becoming a true headliner in Las Vegas was a different challenge entirely. At the time, performers in the lounges rarely made the jump to the main showroom stage. It was Jack Benny who helped change that. Newton made a bold decision, stepping away from higher-paying lounge gigs to become Benny's opening act for a much smaller paycheck. For 5 years, he stayed in that role, learning, refining, and positioning himself for something bigger. Eventually, the opportunity came, but it came with a risk. After his time with Benny, Newton was offered a spot at the Flamingo Hilton. The catch was that he would be opening for someone else. This time, he pushed back. He didn't want to open. He wanted to headline. Surprisingly, the owner agreed, but placed him in November, one of the slowest months in Las Vegas. Back then, the Strip was nearly empty during that time of year, and expectations were low. Most people assumed the show would fail. What they didn't account for was the connection Newton had already built. On opening night, the locals showed up. Not just a few, but enough to completely change the narrative. The crowds filled the room, energy built, and what was expected to flop turned into a breakthrough moment. He didn't just survive, he set attendance records. That night didn't just launch a successful run. It cemented Wayne Newton as a defining figure in Las Vegas. And from that point forward, he wasn't just performing in the city, he became part of its identity. The mob ties nobody saw coming. Everybody already knows the mafia and Las Vegas have a long, complicated history. It's the kind of story filled with power, money, and a whole lot of secrets. But when Wayne Newton got pulled into that world, things went way beyond the usual rumors and whispers. This one turned into a full-blown real-life drama that played out in court. By 1980, Wayne Newton wasn't just another performer on the Strip. He was the guy, the king of Las Vegas. His success basically set the standard for what a headline act in Vegas should look like. But behind all that glitz, a situation was quietly building that would threaten everything he had. That same year, the Aladdin Hotel, one of the Strip's iconic but struggling properties, was put up for sale. Newton and his business partner, Ed Torres, stepped in with a massive $85 million deal to take it over. On the surface, it looked like a power move, another big win for a man already sitting on top of Vegas. Then things started to shift. In September 1980, right after a gaming licensing hearing, Newton found himself being pressed by NBC reporter Brian Ross. But Ross wasn't focused on the hotel deal. He had his eyes on a different name entirely, Guido Penosi. Newton tried to keep it simple. He explained that he first met Penosi back in 1973 while performing at the Copacabana in New York. According to him, Penosi was nothing more than a fan who stuck around over the years. Just someone from the crowd who became familiar. But the truth was a lot more layered than that. What started as a brief encounter didn't stay casual. Over time, Newton and Penosi grew closer. There were dinners, favors, and connections being made. Newton helped Penosi's son land a spot on a TV show and even arranged accommodations for him in Las Vegas. Still, Newton maintained that it was all harmless, a friendly relationship, nothing more. While all that was happening, Newton's life was expanding in every direction. He was mingling with powerful Siasi figures, investing in different ventures, and building a lifestyle that matched his Vegas royalty status. But one of those ventures, a showbiz tabloid, started falling apart fast. That's when things took a dark turn. A furious business partner, upset that Newton refused to keep pouring money into the failing project, confronted him with threats. Not long after, those threats escalated. A mob-connected figure known as Dapper entered the picture, and suddenly the situation became terrifyingly real. The threats weren't just about money anymore. They were personal. They targeted Newton's 4-year-old daughter, Erin. The message was brutal. She would be kidnapped and sent back in pieces. At that point, this wasn't business. This was survival. Desperate to protect his family, Newton reached out to the one person he believed might have connections in that world, Guido Penossi. Newton knew Penossi had a past and assumed he might know people who could make the problem disappear. Penossi then brought in Frank Piccolo, a man with known ties to New York's Gambino crime family. And just like that, the threats stopped. But nothing like that comes free. Soon after, Piccolo allegedly began telling people that Newton now owed him, that he had stepped in, fixed the problem, and in return had a hidden stake in the Aladdin deal. According to investigators, Piccolo even claimed he was a silent partner. Meanwhile, Newton kept pushing forward with the purchase, even managing to beat out Johnny Carson for the property. But during the licensing hearings, everything came under intense scrutiny. Under oath, Newton denied having any silent partners. He downplayed his relationship with Penossi, sticking to the story that he was just a fan and a family friend. He also claimed he had no idea about any mob connections and didn't even know Penossi's full background until authorities brought it to his attention. After the hearing, Brian Ross tried again to get answers, approaching Newton in a parking lot. This time, Newton shut it down completely, refusing to engage. Behind the scenes, reports were already circulating that Newton could be called to testify before a grand jury as part of a larger federal investigation. From Newton's perspective, the pressure from the media felt aggressive and relentless. Eventually, he opened up about the real reason he contacted Penossi in the first place. It all came back to those threats against his daughter. According to him, everything he did was about protecting his family, and the danger only stopped after Penossi got involved. But by then, the damage was already done in the public eye. In April 1981, Wayne Newton decided to fight back the only way he could. He filed a defamation lawsuit against NBC, Brian Ross, and producer Ira Silverman, setting the stage for an even bigger legal battle that would drag his private fears and public image into the spotlight. The trial that changed his story. Now, according to reports from the Associated Press, the situation became deeply personal when Wayne Newton took the stand and opened up about one of the most frightening moments of his life. The moment he saw a certain news report, he turned to his wife and told her he was as good as dead. It wasn't just fear-talking. Not long after, Las Vegas police reached out and confirmed that there really was a contract out on his life. From that point on, Newton's reality shifted completely. His day-to-day life started to look more like something out of a thriller than the routine of a Las Vegas entertainer. He wore a bulletproof vest wherever he went, moved out of his home, and stayed inside the Aladdin Hotel. The only time he stepped out was to perform his nightly shows. Everything else stopped. The focus was survival. By early 1980, the pressure had reached a breaking point. Newton knew he had to do something to protect his family, especially with threats hanging over his young daughter. That desperation led him to Guido Pinosi. During the trial, Pinosi backed up much of Newton's account in a lengthy deposition, though things got tense when questions turned to his own connections. At several points, he refused to answer, leaning on his legal right to stay silent. Pinosi explained that he reached out to his cousin, Frank Piccolo, a figure with ties to organized crime on the East Coast. After a few calls were made, the threats that had been looming over Newton and his family suddenly disappeared. Just like that, the danger was gone. According to Pinosi, that was the last time he had any real contact with Newton. Inside the courtroom, the battle lines were clear. NBC, along with reporter Brian Ross and producer Ira Silverman, stood firm. They argued they never claimed Newton was part of organized crime. Instead, they framed their reporting around the idea that Newton had not been fully honest about his relationship with Pinosi. Then came a key moment that shifted the tone of the trial. A Nevada gaming agent named Fred Ballmer took the stand. Back in 1980, he had actually supported Newton during the licensing process for the Aladdin deal. At the time, he believed Newton had been open and straightforward. But after later hearing testimony from a federal grand jury in Connecticut, his view changed completely. He told the court it became clear that Newton had not fully disclosed the extent of his connections, particularly involving Pinosi and Piccolo. That testimony added fuel to NBC's argument. Their legal team doubled down, insisting their reporting was accurate in suggesting Newton had not been entirely truthful with investigators. Another layer of the story came from Jack Ballmer, a former gaming investigator. He revealed that in an earlier draft of his report, Newton's relationship with Pinosi had been flagged as a concern. That detail, however, was removed before the final version was submitted. According to him, there was pressure to move quickly. The Aladdin had been closed for over a year, and there was urgency to get it back up and running. Even with that, he made one thing clear. The financial side of Newton's deal checked out. The money was clean, verified, and came from legitimate sources. Still, he admitted there was always a feeling that the Pinosi connection deserved a deeper investigation. But time simply wasn't on their side. By the mid-1980s, the rumors surrounding Newton had grown so loud that he had to publicly deny any ties to organized crime. But by then, the story had taken on a life of its own. After years of legal back and forth, the case finally reached a courtroom in 1986. What followed was an intense 8-week trial that ended with a major victory for Newton. A jury ruled that NBC had defamed him and awarded him $19.2 million in damages, concluding that the network knowingly broadcast false and damaging information. But that victory didn't last in its original form. A federal judge later stepped in and slashed the award down to $5.3 million, giving Newton a difficult choice: accept the reduced amount or go through another full trial. After years of legal battles, Newton chose to take the reduced judgment rather than risk starting over. Even then, the fight wasn't over. NBC made it clear they intended to appeal, meaning the payout was far from guaranteed. For Newton, though, the case was never just about money. It was about clearing his name. To him, the original verdict had already sent that message. Looking back, he reflected on how much time had passed and how much his life had changed since the whole ordeal began in 1980. It had been a long, exhausting journey. Still, he never backed away from his central claim. He admitted that he reached out to Pinosi, not for business or gain, but out of fear. Law enforcement, according to him, had limited options at the time, and he felt he had no choice but to look elsewhere to protect his family. Once that connection was made, the threats stopped. That detail became one of the most debated points in the case. NBC's reporting highlighted Penosi's links to organized crime, and the court later found that the way those connections were presented created a damaging impression about Newton. Newton remained firm in his stance. If faced with the same situation again, he would do whatever it took to protect his child, even if it meant making dangerous connections. His legal team pointed out that the reduced judgment had already grown with interest, turning into an even larger figure. They also argued the case could set a major precedent, showing that public figures still had a path to fight back against damaging reporting. NBC, however, saw things very differently. They pushed forward with their appeal, arguing that the case raised serious concerns about press freedom. Their position was that journalists should not be punished for the interpretations viewers take from factual reporting. By the end of the decade, the case had reached the Federal Appeals Court. In August 1990, everything changed again. A three-judge panel overturned the original decision entirely, dismissing the case. The reasoning came down to a legal standard known as actual malice. Because Newton was a public figure, he had to prove that NBC either knowingly reported false information or showed reckless disregard for the truth. The court found that he simply didn't meet that burden. The judges made it clear that there was little evidence to suggest NBC acted with that level of intent. In their view, the reporting may have been controversial, but it did not cross the legal line into defamation. With that ruling, the years-long legal battle came to a sudden and decisive end. But that was just the beginning of Wayne's problem. The empire that quietly crumbled. By 1992, Wayne Newton wasn't just dealing with a rough patch. He was staring down a full-blown financial crisis. According to reports, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, trying to reorganize around $20 million in debt. And this wasn't small-time damage. On paper, Newton still looked like a man living large: an Arabian horse ranch, a sprawling mansion outside Las Vegas, and property out in Lake Tahoe. But behind the scenes, the numbers just weren't adding up. His attorney, Gerald Gordon, pointed to a pattern that had been building for years. Throughout the 1980s, Newton had been pouring money into investments that seemed promising at the time. But as the market shifted, those same deals started losing value. Slowly but surely, the income coming in couldn't keep up with the money going out. Eventually, everything caved in. The warning signs had already started flashing earlier that same year. In February, a savings and loan company moved to foreclose on him over a $200,000 unpaid loan. Not long after, the IRS stepped in with a $341,000 tax lien. For someone who once defined success in Las Vegas, it was a brutal stretch. And the debts kept stacking. At the top of the list was Northeastern Bank of Pennsylvania, owed a staggering $8.3 million. Then came General Electric Credit of Colorado, waiting on another $1.2 million. Beyond the big institutions, there were unpaid legal bills totaling $300,000 across multiple law firms, plus smaller, but still significant, amounts like $13,000 owed to American Express and roughly $14,000 in back taxes tied to his Lake Tahoe property. What made it all more surprising was who Wayne Newton had been just a decade earlier. Back in the 1970s, he wasn't just a performer. He was seen as a businessman who understood money. At one point, he was earning $8.5 million a year, making him the highest-paid entertainer in Las Vegas history at the time. But that reputation didn't hold up when he started branching out beyond the stage. In search of new opportunities, Newton got involved in gaming ventures on Native American reservations. On paper, it sounded like a smart move. In reality, it turned into a series of costly missteps. One example came in 1990. when he took over a struggling 1,800-seat bingo hall on the Santa Ynez Reservation. The idea was simple: bring in more players, increase revenue, turn things around. But the execution fell apart. To fill seats, they had to bus people in from nearby cities like Santa Barbara and Ventura. The transportation costs alone became a major problem, draining whatever profits they hoped to make. In the end, the operation shut down without delivering any meaningful income to the tribe. Things didn't go much better in Oklahoma. That same year, Newton's company, Wayne Newton Gaming Inc., struck a deal with the Seneca Cayuga tribe to operate a bingo hall in Grove. But over time, tensions grew. By the mid-1990s, tribal officials were claiming that Newton's company owed them around $147,000 in unpaid debts, along with an additional $168,000 tied to bills and missed loan payments. Newton's camp pushed back, arguing the venture simply wasn't sustainable without the ability to run higher-stakes games. Either way, the fallout was clear. By 1996, the Oklahoma company filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Then came another gamble, this time in entertainment. In 1997, Newton teamed up with fellow performer Tony Orlando to launch a 2,100-seat venue called the Talk of the TOWN. It had all the makings of a hit, at least on paper. But the crowds never matched the expectations. Some nights pulled in just 360 people. On better nights, maybe 900. For a venue that size, with a $2 million lease hanging overhead, it simply wasn't sustainable. And then things took a strange turn. At one point, recording devices were discovered in a private room the two entertainers shared. Newton claimed he was only trying to record performances, and that the audio quality was useless anyway. But by then, the damage was done. Trust between the two had completely broken down. By 1998, they stopped performing together. Not long after, Newton removed Orlando's name from the venue entirely, rebranding it as the Wayne Newton Theater. What started as a partnership ended as a clean break. While his business ventures were falling apart, his lifestyle never really slowed down. Newton was living on a massive 39-acre estate known as Casa de Shenandoah, modeled after the Tara plantation from Gone with the Wind. The main house alone stretched across 11,000 square feet and originally cost around $4 million to build. But the mansion was just one piece of a much larger picture. The property included multiple guest houses and required a staff of about 70 people to maintain. His love for horses turned into a full-scale operation, with more than 100 animals, complete with their own hospital and even a swimming pool. The estate also featured a car museum, a private jet terminal, a heliport, tennis courts, and even a small zoo, which eventually led to lawsuits after some guests were bitten by the animals. And when it came to transportation, Newton didn't hold back. His collection included luxury cars, a Learjet, and even a Fokker F-28 commercial airliner. By 2000, the financial scrutiny hadn't gone away. The IRS accused Newton of failing to report the sale of a $200,000 Arabian horse. At the same time, his wife, Catherine, was alleged to have left out nearly $400,000 in income in 1999 and over $500,000 the following year, all tied to Newton's business dealings. There were also claims that Newton had overstated employee expenses and made multiple filing errors. The result was a wave of fines added on top of an already heavy tax burden. Still, his legal team pushed back hard, even arguing at one point that the IRS might actually owe him money. By this stage, the image of Wayne Newton had split into two very different realities. Wayne Newton. Transformation is concerning. By the early 2000s, Wayne Newton was ready to reinvent himself again, this time by turning his own life into an attraction. In 2001, he set his sights on transforming Casa de Shenandoah into something bigger than just a home. The vision was clear: a Graceland-style destination where fans could step directly into his world. To make it happen, he partnered with a company called CSD, and together they planned to convert the 40-acre estate into a full-blown experience. The blueprint included a museum dedicated to his career, a dinner theater venue, and even unexpected touches like a car wash. It was ambitious, flashy, and very on-brand for someone who had built a career on spectacle. CSD didn't hold back. The company poured in around $50 million and handed Newton nearly $20 million up front to bring the project to life. On paper, it looked like the reset he needed. But behind the scenes, the same financial pressure was still there. By 2005, the cracks were showing again. The IRS came after him for $1.8 million tied to unpaid taxes from a home sale. Even with that massive deal in place, maintaining his lifestyle was proving to be just as difficult as before. Then came one of the strangest chapters in his story. In 2007, Newton walked away from a private jet, leaving it parked at Oakland International Airport. According to reports, the aircraft had fallen into disrepair, and fixing it simply wasn't worth the cost. So it sat there, untouched, for 3 years. Eventually, it was dismantled and shipped back to Las Vegas, where Newton had it reassembled on his property, turning it into what might be one of the most extravagant lawn ornaments in celebrity history. The financial issues kept piling up. By 2009, he was back in court over relatively smaller, but still telling, debts. There was a $30,000 bill for hay that had been delivered to feed his horses but never paid. On top of that came a $37,000 dispute tied to an unpaid Cadillac lease. It painted a picture of someone juggling both massive obligations and everyday expenses at the same time. Things escalated again in 2010. A former friend, O. Bruton Smith, sued Newton over a $3.35 million loan that hadn't been repaid on schedule. The situation became so serious that there was an attempt to foreclose on Casa de Shenandoah itself. That same year, Newton also had to come up with another $500,000 to settle a separate debt with a former pilot. But the real explosion came in 2012, and this time, it centered on the very project that was supposed to save him. The developers behind the Casa de Shenandoah attraction filed a lawsuit, claiming Newton had completely derailed the deal. Despite receiving tens of millions of dollars over more than a decade, they alleged that he and his family refused to vacate the property. Even more, they claimed he wouldn't hand over personal memorabilia that was meant to be the centerpiece of the attraction. The accusations didn't stop there. According to the lawsuit, the estate itself had fallen into disarray. There were claims of massive piles of horse manure left across the grounds, stables overwhelmed by waste, and conditions so intense that simply being on the property was difficult. Then the allegations took an even darker turn. The lawsuit accused Newton of inappropriate behavior toward employees and described a chaotic environment involving his animals. Workers reportedly dealt with aggressive dogs that were left unrestrained, leading to multiple incidents where people were bitten or forced to climb onto cars and trees just to escape. The filings painted a picture of a workplace filled with fear and unpredictability. There were also claims that some of the animals on the property, including exotic ones, were being neglected and kept in poor conditions. On top of that, a separate allegation described inappropriate conduct toward a female employee, escalating the situation into something far more serious than just a business dispute. Newton's legal team fired back, dismissing the entire lawsuit as a calculated move by the developers. They argued the claims were exaggerated and intended to pressure the Newton family, while also accusing the company of mismanaging the project. According to their side, CSD had spent heavily without proper oversight and even failed to secure necessary building permits, mistakes that reportedly led to construction being shut down at one point. As the legal battle dragged on, the situation reached a breaking point. A bankruptcy judge eventually ordered Casa de Shenandoah to be put up for sale, valuing the estate at around $50 million. For Newton, it marked the end of an era. After years of fighting, the toll on his family had become too much, and walking away, at least for a moment, felt like the only option. The property hit the market with dramatic price swings, starting as high as $70 million, before dropping to $30 million within a year. During that period, Newton and his family relocated, along with their large collection of animals, into 2 separate homes. Then, in a surprising twist, the story circled back on itself. By 2015, Newton struck a deal that allowed him to return to Casa de Shenandoah. Not only that, but the estate finally opened its gates to the public, giving fans a glimpse into the life he had built. For a moment, it looked like a comeback, but the momentum didn't last. In 2018, the property shut down tours, officially for renovations. Since then, it hasn't reopened to the public, leaving that chapter of his reinvention unfinished. Still, Newton found another way to keep going. Starting in 2020, he partnered closely with Caesar's Palace, even appearing in promotional campaigns during the pandemic as a familiar face meant to draw people back in. He had plans for a major return to the stage in 2021, but a back injury forced him to pause once again. It was another setback in a career full of them. By 2022, though, he was back where he had always been strongest, on stage, with a more intimate residency titled Wayne Up Close and Personal. Newton leaned into what made him a star in the first place. The setting was smaller, the tone more personal. He performed his classic songs, shared stories from decades in the spotlight, and connected directly with the audience.